All right, folks, in the interest of time, we'll go ahead and get started. Everyone, thanks for joining the virtual speaker series. My name is Ashish. As a quick introduction, I'm a product leader with experience across various startups, building both B2B and B2C products. Through that, I believe one of the things that's made me successful across my career is the topic we're here to discuss today, which is resilience. And I think this series is going to be fantastic, and it's just part of something that Product Leader Summit is bringing to the broader market. And our mission really here is, it's pretty simple. We want to foster new speakers by giving them a platform to hone their craft. And we want to bring useful content, facilitate small group connections here. So today's agenda will really be an esteemed panel here talking about how to build resilience, a key factor, and I think in any leadership role. So as we kind of move through this, we'll have a quick content session, then we'll have a Q&A session, followed by some NPS feedback. I will parrot this quite a few times across this. We do take this NPS feedback very seriously. A lot of the content you see here is generated from feedback. So please do take a minute or so to complete that, and we'll provide links to go do that. But with all that said, let's go ahead and kick off the panel with introductions. Lori, I believe you're first.
Yeah. So let's go on to our next slide. And we're going to just go ahead and jump right in. So I bet y'all are wondering what a studio is, right? Like, we are definitely doing a panel. You're going to hear from more than one person today. But our vision for what a studio is actually getting interaction, like getting involved. And so what I'm going to call your attention to right here on the screen is a QR code. And so we'd like to do a live question and answer. So if you hear something that resonates with you and you have a question, you have a place to go and add that question, and you have the ability to like vote for somebody else's question. So we'd really like to make this interactive. It's about kind of molding the conversation as we go. That's what we're going to try. And so you're going to hear some personal stories. And those personal stories are from some amazing women. And part of that molding and shaping of what resilience can be, we're going to talk a little bit of tips and tricks of what worked for us. And so we're hoping that it'll be very interactive at the end. And so we're going to try and stick to our time schedule here. That's probably our largest challenge. So if we go to the next slide, who are you going to hear from? Well, these amazing women right here. I'm going to let them each introduce them to you when they start talking about their stories. But what we wanted you to take away from this right now is these are 4 women. I was very lucky. I felt like as we were planning this, these 4 women are passionate about product management. They're passionate about mentorship, sponsorship, leadership, and kind of helping people bring together like that discipline and art and the heart that goes with it. And so what we really hope that you take away is just from our experience and then connect with us later. But you're going to hear about each one of these amazing women and why we're so passionate about being even in the Product Leader Summit and sharing our experiences with you. So we will go. So why is resilience important? Okay. Why is because 84% of people experience a trauma. And what we are hearing today, all of these stats are from this year, from various polls, right? 84% of people experience a mental health challenge in the past year. 2/3 are experiencing burnout on the job. That's amazing. Burnout is a series of traumatic experiences. So why is resilience important? Because 60% of the people who can cultivate resilience are going to thrive. And that's what we want, thriving. We don't want to just get by. We want to thrive. And so if you can shape what resilience can look like for you, then you can thrive. And that's what we want to set you up to be able to do. We can't tell you exactly how. We can just share our experiences on what we've come across. So we'll go to the next slide, and I'm going to introduce Lauren to you in just a moment. So first of all, what is resilience? The ability to adapt and maintain psychological well-being over the long period, because diversity, in adversity happens over a period of time. It doesn't mean you're going to adapt well in the immediate moment, right? So what is resilience not? For us product management people in the Product Leader Summit, it's not grit. It's not the ability to grin and bear it. It's not the ability to stick through it, right? It's the ability to understand where you are in it and adapt as time comes. We think that there's 4 types of resilience that are important, and this is going to go to the tips and tricks: emotional, mental, physical, and social or spiritual. So you're going to hear a little bit about that probably in our tips and tricks. And so with that, I'm going to have Lauren introduce herself. She's our moderator for the rest of the session, and she'll take it from here.
Hello, I'm Lauren. I'm a product and design leader and coach. I feel connected to the topic of resilience because about a year ago, I was part of that 2/3 of folks feeling burnout, overextended, because I hadn't been filling up my cup over time. I was overworked. I was in an unhealthy work environment. And so I was privileged enough to take off and just take a sabbatical. I left work and I've spent a lot of time in the space. I'm someone with a lot of grit, and so I've always leaned into that as a way of succeeding at work. And I hadn't realized grit isn't a sustainable way of working. So I'm not an expert on resilience. I have no formal training, but I have spent a lot of time in the space, and I'm really excited for us to open up this space today, hoping it will help some of you who are here. I look at cultivating resilience as a lifelong journey and something that we'll always have to work on. And so doing it together is exciting to me and hopefully to you as well. I wanted to start out by thanking these women here who have joined and just volunteered to share their stories with us. They're closely connected to the topic of resilience, and we'll figure out why. This is how we're going to break up resilience here. Each of these women have their own journey, as we all do, which is personal and emotional, and it led them to understanding the importance of resilience. So what I'm excited about today is the safe space we're creating with each other to normalize the topic and really dive deep on some of their stories. So I'm going to start out by talking to Pearl. Pearl, could you give us a quick intro of yourself?
Hello, Lauren. Hello, everyone. My name is Parul Goyal, and I am a product executive. Currently, I'm at Indeed, where I lead our payments, billing, and HR systems, platforms, systems. And I have about 20 years of experience in this industry. So I have seen it all. I have seen big successes, colossal failures. And I'm a firm believer that your self-doubt, your failures are a stepping stone to success. So that's my mission in life, is to normalize failure and help people understand that it's just a stepping stone.
Awesome. I love that. Can you tell us a little bit about why the topic of resilience speaks to you and what brought you to talk here today?
Yeah, if you had asked me when I had first started my career, or even a few years into the career, what's the most important thing to have a long, enduring, happy, successful career, I probably would have said talent or communication or networking skills. But over the years, I have realized my answer is going to be resilience, because there is so much that happens in a long career that's outside of your control, right? That can really, really wear down, who you are, your confidence, your psychological safety, that you need some inner resilience to not let these things affect you and keep going. And I learned this lesson through some very hard experiences in my career, and I do want to share a personal one in this forum for you to all to see where I'm coming from. This happened early in my career. So before I was at Indeed, I was at PayPal. Before that, I was a consultant for many years. And as a consultant, I was on a project where we were working with a C-level executive. And this executive had a very fear-based leadership style, right? So the way she got what she wanted, the way she drove results, is by screaming and yelling and abusing. And it was very threatening. And it was very intense and intimidating environment. And she knew what she was doing. She would use it to her advantage, because she would say things like, what would happen if I don't get what I want? Like, she knew that the impact she was having on others. And this was I was early career, a few years of working experience. And this was my first experience with this kind of a toxic environment. And the power, imbalance was huge, right? I was this early career consultant, and she was a client and a C-level one. And I didn't really know how to deal with it. Like, I didn't really know what hit me. I remember every day we used to have this 2 p.m. meeting where I, as the project manager, would report progress to her. And before that, and she would often pick on me because I was the one who was presenting. And before that meeting, I would have severe anxiety. Like I would go into a room, I would have to calm myself down. Sometimes I would cry. Once the meeting ended, I felt like, oh my God, I could breathe again. Like, like this huge boulder has been lifted off me. I would go have coffee, I would have dessert. I would really I would be exhilarated. And then a few hours later, I'll be in tears again, because the cycle would start all over again the next day. So anyway, it was consulting. I rolled off the project eventually, and I was like, oh, this nightmare's behind me. I changed cities. I moved to a new job that I was really excited about. And I started this new job. And a few months later, I realized that I'm not really doing my job. I'm just going through the motions, right? And I wasn't really engaging. I wasn't committing to anything. I wasn't really taking a stand. And thankfully, I knew enough to know this is not me, like something's wrong. And I started seeing a therapist who went through what I have been through. And she diagnosed me with PTSD because of the time I had spent in this toxic environment. And it was maybe 4 to 6 months is what I had spent on that project. And so I worked with that therapist for several months to rebuild my confidence, set small goals, rebuild myself. But I lost about a year and a half of productive time in my career because of this project, and then the trauma that I had to deal with afterwards, right? And I did not learn the lesson after this experience. Also, although it did become apparent to me that there is something more that I need to continue having a successful career. But over time, I realized it's resilience, and I need to develop, and I need to have some inner truth that nobody can challenge, that I know it's true irrespective of what's happening in my life. So Lauren, that's why this topic is so dear to me.
Awesome. Not awesome. I remember you telling me that story, and it's really stuck with me that you could be diagnosed with PTSD from a working environment. I always thought of it as something that people have when they come back from war.
Yeah.
That's really where you hear about it. So in the spirit of sharing with other people so they can be aware of it, can you tell us a little bit about what you learned from the experience, and maybe some tips or tricks for folks who are hoping to work through a similar situation?
Yeah, the most important thing I learned was what I said, that there has to be my inner truth, my self-worth, which is not impacted by what somebody else says to me or what else is happening in my environment. No matter where I am, what I'm dealing with, I know it to be true. And especially when I'm going through a difficult time, it's important for me to stay in connection with that truth. That's what I have worked with. Over time, I have worked with many coaches, with many therapists, and that really has come down to is I need to know who I am. The other tips and tricks when you're going through this, I think kind of asking yourself, why am I here, right? Because the thing that a toxic environment does is distorts your reality. So finding a way to kind of say, I am here because I'm good at my job, right? Or having somebody else in your network remind you of why you are here. Assessing your options. I mean, a lot of times, what's happening in a toxic environment is outside of your control. So how do you get out of it? In the long term, though, I do think it's self-awareness, right? Now, many years later, I do have a good sense of what I'm good at, what I'm not good at. So now if I were in a similar situation, I would not internalize it as much as I did, right? But that did mean that I had to spend several years just kind of really introspecting and really knowing who I am. I know I can share more during Q&A, but for now, I do want to give other speakers time to share their stories.
Great. Thank you so much. I'm going to move over to personal resilience, and we're going to talk to Bosky. Bosky, can you give us a quick intro about yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, and loved Parul's story. And again, thank you so much, for having the stage to share something that is such a personal topic, I think, for me. And I think I was talking about this with someone, and I shared, I really struggle and fight with the topic of resilience, because there are lots of days when I don't want to be resilient. Like, I just want to be like everyone else, just getting by, or passing through life and work, as opposed to kind of constantly struggling with it. So I'm Bosky Mukherjee. I'm based in the Bay Area. I've been in product for over 23, 24 years. Back in the day when product management wasn't called product management, but companies were still building products and commercializing their ideas and taking it to the market. I've worked in some really, really large companies, that span 80 plus countries, and they have a very different way of how innovation happens. I've also worked in several startups and pre-product market fit startups. I've also worked in some really, really cool and amazing companies like Atlassian. I actually also moved out of product in my last role, where I was promoted as the president of the company. Always remained in software world, but I've crossed several domains. So I think B2B to B2C, climate tech, ed tech, e-commerce, marketplaces, you name it. I'm a mom to a 9-year-old human and going to be 5-year-old dog. And I left the corporate world in 2019. And that is what kind of, I think, really made me realize the importance of the topic that we're going to be talking about. And I was given 3 months to live, and we're going to talk about why I am here to talk about this topic back in the day. And I think it really made me question a lot of things, and it made me look at the world very differently. It made me question what I'm doing and why I'm doing, and why I'm in a certain path in my career, and what my work was doing to me, and what some of the other things in my personal life were doing to me. I was also diagnosed with PTSD and had to go through intense therapy that people returning from war actually have to go through. My PTSD had gotten that bad. And I'm currently a founder of a company called PM Dojo, and I really support women, and I want to see more women and minorities up in leadership roles and executive roles without having to go through what I went through, and I think a lot of other people are going through, silently suffering.
Yeah, it sounds it's interesting that you brought up that you don't want to be resilient, and with those things that you shared just now, it's kind of understandable. Is there anything you'd like to share around the topic of resilience and how you've leveraged it through some of those tough experiences?
Absolutely. So I think, I first started unpacking this topic. Like, I've always heard of resilience, not always, but I think I've heard about the topic of resilience, I think, for the last, I would say, about 15-ish years or so. Grit and resilience and courage and all of those things. And I never thought, I don't think anyone thinks that, oh my God, I'm going to have to brave through this, right? To an extent, I think that happened to me. And I would say it was probably February of 2019 when I seemed to have everything on the outside. I was top of, in the company career ladder. I was the president of the company. Outside LinkedIn, out from the outside, everyone thought I basically had it, right? Like, I was a mom, woman of color, leading a company, had a very, very, fast career growth. I was speaking in conferences, and I was kind of speaking, in panels, and everything seemed really good. On the inside, though, I was in denial. Looking back, right? I was in denial. I just had no idea what was going on. I would cry even if I would go to Starbucks and the barista would just ask me, so how's your day? I would literally start crying. I had no idea. And I always kind of just said it like, okay, I'm just stressed out. I'm just going to take the weekend off, or I'm going to take a week off, and everything will be fine. But I knew, but I did not want to do anything about it. I think that's where the denial comes in, when you're so bad in all of this messed up state that impacts your emotional and mental health. I had literally stopped sleeping. I was not sleeping in the night. And this went on for about a year and a half. I would maybe go off to sleep at 4, wake up in an hour. I mean, you cannot function that way. Right? I was not eating my food. I would just eat my dinner, just a little salad here and there. I was just getting very irritable. But I was completely not noticing that. People around me were asking me how things are, but of course, everyone kind of pushed it and defined it as like, oh, you have a really very stressful career, like you just moved into a business executive leadership role. It's very different from being a product exec, right? When you're kind of literally running the whole business. And it was a very dysfunctional company as well. But what happened in February was that I had gotten so irritated. My son was only 3 years old, and he was seeing all of this, but he was also internalizing everything that I was doing. And I think his one seemingly innocent question to me one day, and he said, "Mom, have you started loving me less? And is it because of the scar that I have in my chest?" And his scar was not just a regular scar from a fall. His scar was actually from 3 open heart surgeries as a baby. And I think that made me pause, and that made me, I think for the first time in so many years, and question what was going on and whether I had crossed that point, that threshold, and that I needed help because I was in a path of self-destruction. Like my son was only 3 years old. And I think it was for the first time after giving birth that I had gone to a doctor. I mean, as women and anyone who's given birth, I don't think that is recommended or normal. But I think I had just developed this utter distaste for medical staff, so seeing what had happened to my son. So his first surgery had gone really bad. It was, it did not go well. His first open heart surgery when he was just 8 days old after being born. And then I saw him go into a cardiac arrest. I mean, there were so many things at a personal level as a mother that I went through that I just shoved it at the back, just trying to cope and survive. So I think my story about why I say I wish I did not have to be resilient, I think comes from the fact, like, I wish we as a family did not have to go through that. I wish I did not have to be this brave. And so for me, resilience was not a nice to have. There was no choice but to be resilient and brave. So that's why I have a love-hate relationship with this topic.
Thank you so much for sharing. You mentioned something, you mentioned that you got to this point and you had this aha moment when your son asked this question. For those listening who might be struggling with other things in their life, are there any signs, symptoms, or tips you would share to help people recognize when they perhaps need to step in and get help?
I mean, I'm not a licensed therapist. I mean, my condition itself went undiagnosed for years, right? Like it was not just that happened because of work. It was a culmination of things. But I think looking back, I think having if people around you start telling you like what's going on, you've lost that spark, right? And you don't have to be an extrovert to have the spark. I'm an introvert person. I'm a deeply introverted person. But if someone starts asking you that, if you find yourself that you're losing interest in the things that once used to be you were just passionate about, that filled you with the joy and that really made you do a lot of things and spend some time to do things. If you're starting to find that you're losing interest, you're not sleeping, you don't want to eat, these are signs that you should at least go to your doctor and get yourself checked, because a lot of the times what I have realized and what I've seen talking to a whole bunch of folks struggling with resilience or lack of, struggling in this weird middle messy space, is that it starts impacting our personal health. It might not happen right at that front, but it does. And it does affect you in a really bad way. So for like in my case, I was my heart rate and everything had gotten so dangerously high that I was given 3 months to live. And so you don't want to be there, because bouncing back from that is a very scary affair. So I think just having that self-awareness of, what is it that I'm now different, and taking very much cue of these signs, and just, I think, go to your doctor on a regular basis, get yourself checked just as a proactive thing. I know in the US, healthcare is kind of an interesting affair. I'm saying this just because I come from Canada and we never had to think about anything. You would just go to the doctor, at least for your regular stuff, and not have to worry about insurance or whether a particular doctor is in network, out of network, even if you have the best healthcare insurance. But I think just go to your doctor and don't feel that you are weak or not strong if you're looking for help. Don't do things career-wise to prove others wrong, because that's what I did. I wanted to stay in that role because I was so, I got told every time you need to break the glass ceiling, right? Like, women, you want to do that. You want to set an example to everyone else. And I think I forgot that I wasn't doing it for myself. I was doing it for others. So I think that, and find the right therapist. You don't have to just stick with one. There are so many different modalities that I had no idea. But I think get help. And there is no, again, as I said, like, if you have to go on a medical leave, go on a medical leave, like, figure it out. You don't have to stick and suffer in silence, talk it out. I had written a LinkedIn article as I started getting better, about the guilt and the shame as I was navigating this whole episode in my life. And kid you not, within 24 hours, I had messages from over 800 people from all over the world talking to me about how they experience the same thing. So, I mean, this is pandemic, essentially. And so I think, yeah, if you feel like sharing your story helps in a cathartic way, do that. Would save people, so that it don't kind of jeopardize your career. So I think those would be some of the things. Know those triggers really well. I think that is another one. I've come to a place where I recognize a lot of the triggers. Like, right now, I know it's a very heightened space for me because we're back at the hospital for my son. And so, yeah, I have to be extremely careful about understanding those and making sure that I am doing things to support myself so that I don't go crazy.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. I'm just reading the comments in the chat, and I know that the folks here are really happy you shared, and they would love the link to your article if you're willing to share that.
Happy to share that.
But overall, thank you, Bosky. It's never easy to transition after such deep stories. But for the sake of time, we're going to move on. If you have any questions for Bosky, please put them in the Q&A Slido, or put them in the chat. That's okay too. We're going to move on to professional resilience. And Lori is going to talk with us about professional resilience. So Lori, could you give us a quick intro of yourself?
Sure. I'm going to start on the personal side. So personally, I'm a dog mom of 2 Westies, so fur children, and I am probably maniacal about the 2 guys. To know me is to know them. I'm a New Englander, moved to California over time, kind of kicking and screaming, but came as my career took me farther and farther west. So that's on the personal side. On the professional side, I've been in product for the last 20 years as an executive, and in the workforce, just focused on my passion for almost 30 years now. So wow, that blows my mind. But when I talk about my passion, I've always worked like at this intersection of customer engagement meets data, meets financial services and healthcare, and like making affordable access to healthcare and how you manage and deal with your money and your health. That's my passion. So that's my background. I've been lucky enough to work and be part of 2 startups and go IPO twice. And the pace at which it means to go from product I don't want to say product idea, because in both cases it was a little farther along, but to actually get into an IPO situation and then get acquired, that was a huge pace difference. But I've also had the luxury of working for large companies, right? The established brand that gets you access to customers. And so that's the other thing I'm always really proud of, is the number of customers that I've been able to work with in regulated industries, just in my passion of affordable, accessible healthcare. And so that's my background. There. always willing to talk about that outside of this too.
Awesome. Can you tell us a little bit about why the topic of resilience speaks to you?
Yeah, like, so first of all, I feel like over the tenure of my career, like the number of workplace challenges and the fact that there's barriers all along the way, like even when you think like, am I doing the right things? Like something comes up. And so I feel like I've had setbacks and I've had rebounds. And so I just thought like some of those might, be relatable, and I can share that with you. And so, and you know, in that, one of the threads is just pursuing your passion and knowing what you can relate to just authentically take that forward. So I think I had two kind of challenges that I wanted to talk about. The first one was earlier on in my career and when I was entering product management, but how many of you have not got the job you want? How many of you have not got the promotion that you want? And you're thinking, aren't I doing everything right? Why, you know, I'm a good performer. Why am I not moving? So in one of the first companies that I was in, I was one of the only people in the financial services space. It was a CRM company. And I had the mentorship and sponsorship of the CEO, had our biggest clients, and a product management job came up and I applied for it. And I didn't just apply for it. Like I came to corporate headquarters every week. I talked to everybody there and they told me no. They said, we want somebody with a marketing degree and you have an engineering degree. So, and I was like, wait a minute, like I know better than almost anybody how our customers use the product and how to make them better and how to talk about it. And they still said no. And so even with the sponsorship of the CEO, it didn't move forward. And so what did I do? Like, well, I did lament it. I won't lie. Like you have to give yourself space to lament it and reflect on it. And then I just started talking to people about like what our clients do, what I do, why I thought I was a good fit to move into product and what I could take. And I went to my network and I just started talking to people. And lo and behold, an opportunity came up and I ended up at Oracle as a senior product manager. That was my convergence like into a new company. And I ended up, the company that I worked for went out of business a week after my start date. I shouldn't say went out of business, they were acquired. And then I ended up owning 3 product lines at a very rapid pace. And mostly what I was super excited about is the access to customers and what I was able to talk to customers about. And so it's about like falling down and being like, but this was my goal, you know, and if I've given so much to this company, why can't I kind of get to that next place? It's kind of a common theme. So the second kind of scenario that I wanted to tell people about or just ask is, how many of you are like all-star performers? Like you've been significantly exceeding expectations, but still not gotten there. Like, and you're not sure, you're not getting clarity from your manager, or you're not getting clarity and you're putting your everything into it. I'm a giver. I'm also somebody who hustles to prove value. I know that in product outcomes, pace. You know, I get really good at hustling for value really fast. But you know what? It leads to burnout, exhaustion, and health issues. And so the next scenario for me personally that really just is kind of a pivotal point in my life was I actually had a doctor's appointment. So Bosky, like just like you, is like I have some health issues. Like I know they're going on. I'm just so busy, right? Like I work a global schedule, you know, so like, how do I get that in? And I got a health diagnosis of being diagnosed with pancreatic cancer and trying to overcome, like just trying to grasp, like, what does this mean? At least there's some answers to why I've been sick and why I'm not feeling good and still trying to power through everything. And it happened to be on the same day that I was doing annual planning and having to present the entire next year's product plan to the company. So I still did it. Like, I was just like, this is a doctor's appointment. I can go like to work still, even though, and I was already committed. So I, once I got that diagnosis, I will say I was numb, and trying to think of things, but I did go to work. And as part of going to work, I got to work, and then my first meeting was with my boss, and an HR team member was there, and they proceeded to tell me that my replacement was starting on Monday. And so, but can you still present next year's product plan? Same day, same thing, worst day of my life. And so what did I do? Again, I needed to focus on my health, right? Like, I needed to lament what was going on. I needed to just get some space. So I did focus on my health. I did take a break. One of the things that was made very important to me, as there was a health issue going on, was that I did not lose my job. I did not lose a job, I should say. I lost my job, but not a job. And so what they said to me was, we will work with you. Let's define something new. So I did take some time to get health stuff in order, collect my thoughts, reflect, what am I going to do? Get the right appointments in place. And also work-wise, after I got through a series of appointments, I just started showing up. Like, I just started coming back and being in community and coming to the table and saying, here's what I could do. I got to write my own job description for a product strategy role, one where I wasn't involved in the operations of releases and features and all of that, but I could focus on how our customers were using our product and how that had to impact regulators, how that had to impact what they understood of sharing data today in today's AI world, and I got to focus on that in my professional career and my health, kind of at the same time. So, that's how I looked at it. And then, so go ahead, Lauren.
I'm sorry, I was trying to find the mute. It moved. I realized I shouldn't have had the screen share on this whole time. It'd be nice to see people's faces as they're sharing. So I apologize for that. But the mute button moved on me. Lori, that's a crazy story. What did you learn from the experience? Like, is there anything that you would want to share with the group?
Yeah, like, when I was looking at those kind of topics of resilience, and I won't lie, one of the things I haven't shared is I'm currently in transition for my world. And for those of you in the in transition market, resilience is required in this job market. So it doesn't end. You get through one maybe traumatic event, and there's more to come. So that idea of shaping, and is constant, and molding like what resilience looks like for you. And sometimes I'm like, wait a minute, but I got through that. Like, why am I having so much trouble now? Right. So the kind of takeaways and the tricks, like, the first thing for me was, and what people have told me, like, the first thing for me is social resilience. Like, how do I get in community? Community is super important, and community, even outside of your job, is super important, right? I'm part of a professional women's network. I have my own personal board of directors now, that even though I'm not working, I still contribute. I show up. And if I can be involved, no matter what's going on, what I heard was, you have to give what you want to get. And so putting yourself kind of in those situations where you're talking through your situations, you're connecting to people, you will be able to do that. And you show up to those with intention and with presence. And so being in community has been one of the most important things, and I think I mentioned it also, is take the time to reflect and really understand what you're passionate about, what you have to give, and then keep showing up, because eventually something will happen.
Great. Thank you for sharing. I think we have about 20 minutes left if we want to move into the Q&A. For those who would like to ask, we have some questions in the Q&A. So I'm going to start kind of talking through some of them. But if you have any other questions, please feel free to drop them in the Slido, linked at the top of the meeting here. So a couple of the questions that are coming up: how would the group define success in terms of practicing resilience? What routines or habits help? Lori, you kind of started talking on this subject. Do you want to go ahead and give us your input here?
Yeah, one of the things that I'm trying to do, and it's funny because I've had to learn this through my transition period right now, but I just, some of my routines are like, how do I have some spiritual time? And sometimes that's in community and sometimes it's not. It helps center me for the day. So I actually try to get up, even when I'm in transition, a couple days a week at 5 a.m. to just center myself. And sometimes that's meeting with other women who are also executives that are kind of doing the same thing and starting my day with them. And they're all over the country. And it's what do you need to do to just center yourself for the day, whether that's a spiritual practice, whether it's exercise, it could be physical, whether it's like even cooking, right? Like saying, I'm going to make myself a good breakfast, like just trying to do that. And it's not always easy because 5 a.m. comes early, so, but that's my choice. And I've been building muscle there, right? So understanding you're not going to set a goal and get there right away. But part of resilience is building up to that.
I like that. It's building the muscle and strengthening it. Bosky or Apparel, is there anything you would add?
Yeah, 100% agree with what was said. I think for me, I focus on two things, and I make it my almost everyday practice. So I think that I'll add third thing as well. I think the number one, I'm going to start with my, I think, definition of what good looks like has drastically changed, and I am getting okay with that. By that, what I mean, a simple example, I've always been an avid reader. Doesn't seem like anything to do with resilience. But now I could read a book, a good 600-page book over the weekend, just devour it. That's just how I've been since I was a little kid. But I think now, if my days are going really bad, even if I read a paragraph, I don't kind of kill myself and, like, oh, you're so bad, you couldn't even do something that you've been doing it for almost 40 years now. So I think my definition of what good looks like has changed, and I'm okay with that, and I'm accepting that. And I think that's been a huge help, just mentally, not to get into this self-destructive behavior that actually really did not work for me. I think another thing is to really, I think, be very, very mindful on some of those mindsets that are needed to get through, and make sure that I am reminding myself of some of these things. I think one thing that did not come from my therapist, my very expensive therapist, but it's actually come from my son, who's 9 years old. He's going to be 10 this month. Is when I was having a really crappy, shitty day a few weeks ago, I wanted to give up everything. I was kind of crying as he saw me as that. And he just told me the most beautiful thing. And again, coming from, I think, a 9-year-old, it kind of made me realize that sometimes we just overcomplicate. And I think he said, Mom, you can do this, just imagine, right? Like when we go on vacations, we see surfers, they crash and they fall and they're rising in the wave and they're having a gala time. And that wave that is high will crash. And then you have to patiently wait for the next wave to rise up again. And you know that that's going to crash again. And sometimes you just have to wait forever and ever and ever for the next wave. And so you will get through this. And I think, the way he said it, of course, I haven't been able to say it like him in his innocent view of the world, but I think it just made so much sense to me. And I actually have written it down and I read it, I think. So I think some of those things, right? Like the mindset, like how do you know what fights to fight? I was always known as someone who would basically like to teach the person who's not playing by the rules, that you should be playing by the rules. That was something that I've always done. I think that just kind of messed up. And so now I'm like, well, you know, I'm not your parent. You decided to behave in a certain way. Well, you are going to live with those ramifications. I'm not your mom. I'm sorry. Like I'm going to try to do everything to nurture my son so that he doesn't end up being a jerk like you, but it's not my responsibility to turn you into a non-jerk. Like that's who you are. So I think fighting the right fights, and that needs a lot of discipline, and that I think needs to be very, very intentional. So I think that is something that I practice every day. And I think the third thing is I am very clear on what my 2 or 3 non-negotiables are. And it has taken me a lot of work to get there. And every single day, I evaluate everything that I do on my non-negotiables. And so, as I mentioned, we're going through a very personal, very hard place right now. But this talk was something that I had committed to Shubha months ago, and I just knew that this was not something that I could. But I did say no to 5 other things that did not fit my non-negotiable list, and so I'm very, very clear on what those are. And I think that has been my compass, and that has been a practice that I do every single day to make sure that I'm keeping my sanity and also building on that resilience muscle. And I think the last tip that I would leave everyone with is, I think, really know when you are starting to feel like you need to pause. And it's okay. It's okay if you need a 15-minute walk to just kind of recharge. It's okay to just sit down and talk with your dog. It's okay to yell in the redwoods. I do that. It's okay to punch the pillows and the cushions, like wherever you need to take it out. Take it out. Just don't take it out on your loved ones and yourself.
Yeah, that's
I'll add 2 things. One is, over time, I've realized that work cannot be all of my identity, right? If so much of my identity is tied to work and work is not going well, it just deeply, like it really, like it tears me down, right? So over time, I have made a conscious effort to shift what I do, of how I define myself, right? And I think of myself as a really fun person. Like that's my main identity. So hanging out with my friends, making sure I make time for my close friends. Like I play badminton and I really love it. So there are all of these other things. I'm a mom. I have a 2-year-old, right? So making sure that I spend quality time with her. And I take a lot of pride on these things. So even if something's going on at work that I don't enjoy, I know that I'm okay. And the second thing is, this is more tactical. I also know on a day-to-day basis what wears me down. And I'll tell you, the number one thing that wears me down is meetings, right? So like there are weeks when I start feeling like I have 6 hours of meeting, I can't do this. And I clear my calendar. I make that, 4 hours of time for me to do deep work. So I do prioritize what I need. And that basically means I don't let my gas tank go below a certain line, right? So I take proactive steps to evaluate how I'm feeling and let me take care of myself.
Well, I was just going to add one more that just stuck out to me that I didn't touch on, but volunteer, like finding like something that, it's so funny because I'm a giver, right? So like finding something I'm passionate about that's just a little bit tangent off. Like for me personally, like I'm not a parent. I always thought I would be a parent. But I have found volunteering in the foster care system is a passion of mine, right? Like, and that was something that I didn't think I could do because I wasn't a parent, but there's so much that you can do. And it takes all those same skills that we're using professionally, this resilience and that ability to take that time and listen and still give, right? So like whatever it is, it doesn't have to be foster care, but it could be a parent association, but finding something to volunteer with that's outside of you is super beneficial and helps you with your priorities.
Yeah. Another question here we have is, what signals tell you that you're being resilient versus gritty? Carol, do you want to answer that one?
Yeah, I also confuse them many times, right? Where I'm doing something, I'm sticking to something that's actually hurting me, but maybe it's about ego, maybe it's about identity, and then I stick to it. And grit is not the answer all the time, right? There are like quitting is underrated. So over time, like, I really I follow tennis. I admire a lot of professional tennis players, and I feel like I see when I look at them, like I have found some really good examples that resonate with me. Like if you look at top tennis players, they're very gritty. That's what it has taken them to get to that level. But if they have a physical injury, like if their knee is hurting them or their foot is hurting them, they take time out, because it's super important for them to do that so that they can come back and reclaim their number one spot, right? And so now when I am like kind of tempted to kind of define my identity by like, oh no, I need to get through this, I'm like, no, like I am part of a bigger landscape. Like this is I like, if I want, I don't really like to use these terms, but it's like I need to win the war, not the battle. So if it means right now giving this up because that's what's best for me, I'm going to do that. Right. So I always keep an eye on in the long term, what's going to help me get there, what's going to help me meet my goals, what's going to keep me in a position where I still enjoy getting there. And that's how in my mind, that's how I make the distinction of whether I should stick to it versus I should not.
Yeah, those are great insights. I love the comparison to the tennis players and how important it is to, give it your all, but then rest. I think the rest and recovery is something we all overlook.
If I may add just very quickly, I think in my mind, the way I look at it is, I think grit is, like Parul said, it's your ability to persevere and keep at something if you truly strongly believe that that is something that you want to achieve. I think resilience is really about bouncing back. So every time there is a setback, do you have the ability to bounce back within a certain period of time, right? And for some people, it might be, I've never seen someone that just snaps back just like that. I think we're all humans. But I think, do we get into this, again, the self spiral that kind of goes into months and days and weeks or years that just keeps us at where we are? Or are we able to kind of do whatever pep talk we need to do and everything that we need to do in our toolkit and basically bounce back and get up? Does it mean that you've completely cured or fixed or whatever? No. But you keep that at the back of the head and you kind of figure out how to plow through, because again, life is a wave, right? You crash and you go high.
Yeah. Are there any tips that either of you would provide on how you know when to give up and pivot versus keep going? That's a question we have.
I think I can quickly share. I think I have always used, and I don't know how I picked this up, but apparently even as a kid, my mom says that I always used to time box stuff. And so I have always been a tinkerer, right? Like I would kind of break things up, build things up. I did lots of extracurricular activities in school, but everything was time boxed. And I did it in my own way as a kid. And I think as an adult, I've always done it. I've always done it with my PMs as well, so that we could avoid the rabbit hole thing. And I think for me, everything is a time box. Like I will time box things and I'll be like, okay, if I cannot prove what needs to be proven and basically validate the riskiest of the assumptions, a very product management hat is what I have to life and work. Basically, I'm going to have to ask myself, if the signals are not giving me those signals that it might be a success, then I need to pivot. And I think over time, I've learned somewhat like, what does that time box look like? So, whether I need to be at it for just 1 hour and figure it out, whether I need to do it for like a month. When I started PM Dojo, my own business, I'd given myself 3 months to validate the entire business model. Like it had to be a profitable business without raising any funds. And I said, yeah, 3 months is at it. And so I approached it in that very specific way. Same thing happens when I'm in my lowest lows. I'm going to give myself a time box and say, okay, if you want to vent, you want to cry, you want to punch, do it for this amount of time. But then you got to just get back. And so that has been my personal toolkit.
Yeah, I agree with everything that Bosky said. Time boxing it, like if this doesn't get better in X number of months, I'm going to do something different. And number 2 is looking for evidence, like really making an evidence-based decision. Like not in sometimes when you're feeling low, you also let your biases get in the way. So it's like being aware of that a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. I think we have time for one more question. So how does vulnerability and resilience relate to each other for those who have shared stories today? Lori, is there anything you'd add here?
It's allowing yourself to be vulnerable in the things that kind of come up, right? Like, because resilience is kind of learning to bounce back. So like, that's why like sharing and allowing that vulnerability to like actually come up and sharing it. And it's really tricky on the professional side when to do that and when not to do that, like how to balance that line between what do I share and what do I not share. I found that when I share, is when it works the best, right? And sometimes being so goal driven and outcome driven, like sometimes you can like lose sight of that, right? So like making sure that you're stopping to connect and allowing that vulnerability. And I also think that vulnerability is a two-way street. So like giving other people the space to be vulnerable with you. It's not just like, okay, I like this person, we're hitting it off. Whether it's in a forum like this and telling your story, it's also like taking the time to connect later and giving other people space for it to resonate and to just kind of give and take.
Yeah, I would agree. There have been times when I'm going through something and I'm too ashamed to share it, or I'm too embarrassed to share it. And over time, I have realized that's a cage that I have built for myself. And when I do the opposite, when I get over it and share my experience, more often than not, I walk away with a different perspective. Whereas, like, somebody can actually see things differently, which helps me get out of this victim mentality or a venting mode and gives me idea to move forward. Right. And that only happens when I'm vulnerable, when I'm able to say, I am going through this and it's making me feel this way. Right. So over time, I think the fear really is people will think I'm weak or I don't know how to handle it. Right. And the thing is, at times that is true. That's what's going on in my life. And the moment I'm able to admit it, I get the help that I need. And once I realize that, it becomes a lot easier to do it.
I love that. And I'm just going to add a couple things here. I think someone had mentioned this to me a few years ago, and that is people don't care about you. You may think that people may think you're weak, but at the end of the day, they're so obsessed with themselves that they freaking give no shit about you and what you're going through. So you gotta, pardon my French here, but you gotta have, I think vulnerability means you have to have that emotional honesty with yourself. And I think a lot of times it can start with just you being vulnerable to yourself. And a lot of times I think we don't acknowledge and we don't accept that these things might be happening. And so I think the vulnerability thing, in order to be resilient, starts with, I think, we ourselves unpacking it, realizing, and sometimes it's okay if we aren't able to figure out what the hell is going on and we don't know how to define it, because these things are so fuzzy. They don't come nicely boxed in a tie and says, oh boy, you are having, you're not being courageous enough, or you're kind of suffering. Like everything is so like spilling all over. That's very hard to figure it out. But I think, just realizing that, okay, first I got to figure it out myself to understand. And if I'm not able to unpack what might be going on with me, let me try to have at least one conversation with someone. It could be your doctor, it could be your best friend, it could be your spouse, it could be a dog, it could be yourself, like whatever it is, have that chat. And then start to kind of build that resilience muscle. And I think one thing with resilience muscle is that you cannot just be using it. You have to fill it. It's like a bank account. And so if you just keep on at it, trying to be resilient, and you don't take rest to rebuild that muscle, you're going to basically run out of gas, like I think Parul was talking about. And then that is a very hard place to recover back, right? That's like lack of resiliency at that point of time.
Yeah, it feels a lot harder to go back and fix things once they're already to a bad place. There are some resources we have at the bottom of our slide deck. I've shared it here with all of you. I want to thank the speakers for sharing, for being vulnerable. The stories are very deep and personal to them. So thank you so much. And thank you all for joining.
Thank you for moderating, Lauren.